Now that the decomposition science packs are making it to Norvis, we've been able to start looking into Pelagos related research, which has uncovered some new toys. Welcome to Laurence Plays Factorio Planetary Pioneers, where our latest toy seems to have a death wish. Pelagos already has a number of different transport systems. There's the standard ones like belts and bots, we've got the cargo ships that you've seen before, but Saphir has set up another very exciting one, the long-range delivery drone. These guys are essentially a single-use, high-capacity, long-range logistics bot. They go from a drone depot, or launch pad, to a request depot, which looks a lot like the delivery cannon chest from space exploration. The drones move pretty quickly, certainly many times faster than the cargo ships, and can carry 5 stacks of supplies. Once they get to the drop-off point, they start to circle, doing a series of bombing runs, dropping off a stack at a time, before presumably running out of fuel and heroically crashing into the sea. Fortunately, the drones and their infrastructure are relatively cheap, otherwise this would be a horrendous way to transport resources. We can throw one together for a mere 5 titanium, a red circuit and an engine unit, plus a load of ethanol to power the thing as it flies over. On Pelagos, this makes them really very cheap. The science island already has a supply of titanium, engines and ethanol, and it was very easy to modify the blue circuit ship to carry red circuits as well. I've set it to load up to 40,000 blue circuits and 15,000 red circuits, and to leave once it satisfies the blue total to ensure that the rockets keep flying. That said, 40,000 is a phenomenal number of circuits, given that we're currently making about 50 per minute, and a lot of those are being stolen by the mall. I guess the ship will finally be ready to leave in about 4 streams, so far we've been dispatching the ship manually whenever there seems to be a bit of a shortage. Perhaps we should lower that trigger number but put an inactivity of a couple of seconds, so if the circuits are available, they'll keep loading, or we could transmit a signal from the drop-off port through the lighthouses to let us know when it runs out at that end. Setting up different stockpiles of red and blue circuits was surprisingly easy here. When I first built the port, I set up a simple but unbalanced splitting system for the circuits. There's 12 chests, so I split the feed in half repeatedly with no loopback, meaning that the bottom 4 chests would receive twice as much per chest as the top 8. That is, the same total amount across them, but that meant it was trivial to set up a filter on the first splitter so that the top 8 get the blues and the bottom 4 get the reds. This means that when we set up the port at the other end, we can split off the 2 different resource types in more or less the same way, with lots of blue circuits and a bit of a shortage of reds at the moment. Never mind, if we follow that up, we can see that there's still some on the belt, and Saphir's drone production has filled its belt, so that seems to be working well. He set up circuit conditions on the inserters down here to make sure that an appropriate number of drones, 1, and titanium, 600, are being loaded into the launch pad, but only if there's plenty of titanium available for rocket production. Rockets should always be the priority. The launch pad then acts as a red chest. If there's an unsatisfied request in a landing chest, it will automatically launch a drone to fly over there, like this. The landing chests act like green chests, in that you can set a request on them for the drones to deliver, and once it has arrived, the logistics bots will happily take from it to pass on to other requesters. They will also bring the requested items over to it from any red or yellow chests in range as well, so it really does act like a green chest, with the drone part then bolted onto the side of it. So far, bringing supplies over by drone like this has been more than sufficient. We're not using very much titanium on home island, but that might change in the future, we'll see. It also occurs to me that shipping the red circuits and maybe even the blue circuits down by drone could make sense and be much easier. We'll perhaps consider that for the future. This is the sort of low volume delivery where things like bots or drones make a certain amount of sense, but don't tell anyone I said that. Another logistical upgrade is the tanker ship. Where the cargo ship could only take solids and so needed a supply of barrels to transport ethanol, methane and so on around the seas, the tanker ships can be filled up and emptied by pumps, just like the fluid wagon on a train, except they're a lot harder to line up with the pumps. The capacity is exactly the same as the cargo ship. Each barrel contains 50 fluid and stacks to 10, so a full ship with 500 stacks of barrels contains 250,000 fluid, exactly the same as a tanker ship. Tankers do have the major advantage of not having to handle the barrels, which is convenient, but they also have a number of disadvantages. We didn't get them when we unlocked cargo ships. This means that a lot of our infrastructure has been built up around using cargo ships full of barrels to transport our fluids around, because that was what we had available. So far, we've rebuilt the ethanol transport to use a tanker ship, and would certainly use them for any new systems, but I'm not convinced it's worth switching over any system which is already working properly. Whilst the two ship types do have the same fluid capacity when using steel barrels, titanium barrels stack to 20, and so if we started using those, a cargo ship would have twice the capacity of a tanker ship. This would be a major investment in titanium barrels, but it would make the old style ship significantly better than the new one. This feels the wrong way round. Because we switched ethanol over to a tanker ship, we now have 5 cargo ships parked out at sea full of ethanol barrels. We could send those over to a port and empty them, but we would still have ships full of empty barrels. This feels wasteful. If we expanded this planet further, then the ships could probably be repurposed, perhaps to carry titanium or circuits or iron or whatever we needed, but we would still have a barrel mountain somewhere. We could send those barrels of ethanol up to spaceships when we build some with ethanol thrusters, which we'll talk a lot more about in the future. But again, these are steel barrels which are less efficient to send up, and the barrels would just get returned for refilling anyway. That's not a sink unless the spaceship just throws them overboard. And the same is true for using them to fuel the ships. We get the empties back, so they wouldn't be used up. Maybe we should just sink them and sell scuba diving tours to the spitters. Setting up the ports is more difficult. Inserters, chests, pipes and belts can all be built on the wooden platform, which means you can build your port as far out into the ocean as you want. The platforms will be fine. But you can't place pumps on wooden platform, which means there's no way to pump a fluid in or out of the ship if it's too far out at sea. Landfill can only be placed in the shallow water near the islands. There's a good reason for this. Talandar didn't want players to be able to run long pipelines between islands on the wooden platform, and forbidding pumps ensures that if you want to transport fluids, you have to either put them in barrels on a belt or load them onto a ship. Unfortunately, whilst we have no desire to run a long pipe between our islands, we've been caught in the crossfire and now have to be very careful about where we place our fluid ports. You can see with this example how I've used landfill for the pump and quite a bit of the rest of the port if I'm being honest, and whilst this one was fine, the one on Copper Island had to be shifted a bit to get the pump into a position where I could put landfill underneath it. The correct fix for this is to plan ahead. Place your fluid ports close enough to the land that you can use landfill, or use the excavators to dig canals or inlets for your ports. However, since I was adapting the ports that I'd already built for the cargo ships, where this doesn't apply, that was a bit awkward. Still, we've got everything set up now, and it's mostly working, except this ship has been called for before there's enough space in the tanks for it to unload. We'll have to take a look at that. Finally, it's rather difficult to work out where the pumps are supposed to be. It looks obvious, but they refuse to connect to the ship. Tristan and I messed around a little, moving a pump slowly along the side of the ship until it finally latched on, and once we got one working I could copy and paste the port, so it's annoying, but it's not a long-term problem. So, in a nutcase, the problem with the tankers is that by the time you unlock them, you've already solved fluid transport and they don't give you a compelling reason to switch. They're probably a little quicker to fill and empty, but given how slowly ships move, that's only a minor improvement at best. So what's the answer to all these problems? Well, I think the best one would be to be given tanker ships at the same time as cargo ships. Vanilla gives you both cargo and fluid wagons at almost the same time. After unlocking trains in general, fluid wagons are the very next research using the same science packs and only requiring fluid handling as an additional prereq. This would solve the problem of having a load of already built infrastructure, ships full of barrels, and would allow you a sneaky boost to carrying capacity by upgrading later to cargo ships full of titanium barrels if you wanted that extra capacity in return for the extra complexity. It would also fix the port problem because you'd be building for tanker ships from the start. The other possibility is to find a way to make the tanker ships better than the cargo ships, so it's worth the hassle of upgrading. We mostly did it because, well, they're there and because we like to play with all the toys. But if they had a much bigger capacity or some other advantage, then that would work too. But you don't want to nerf the cargo ship size for other resources. The whole point of the cargo ship is that it's enormous, and you don't want to nerf the amount of fluid that can be carried by a rocket, so you don't want to make the barrel smaller either. This one is trickier, especially as 250,000 is already a lot of fluid. Increasing the capacity to 1 million seems excessive even by Factorio standards. I think unlocking both types of ship at the same time is the best answer here, but clearly someone in the chain of mod authors didn't agree. Given all of these disadvantages, whilst I don't regret trying out one of the tanker ships for the ethanol, I don't think we'll be switching over coconut oil, methane or titanium sludge. We've had a bit of a ship time with our boats, some were getting stuck, some were taking silly routes, and in general, there were issues. This probably largely came from us running shipping lanes wherever we felt like, and then having a shortage of copper, which meant a shortage of green circuits and a shortage of buoys to keep the ships corralled and behaving. In order to fix things up at least a little bit, Mike went round all the routes to make sure that all the junctions were properly buoyant and that long runs that might get used by multiple ships had buoys every so often to help with the ship flow. I think a bit more work is required around Home Island. This is a mess and could do with being completely removed and replaced with a nice loop with spurs and possibly roundabouts to allow the ships to go to all the ports. I don't think we need an outer loop going around the outer islands. Going around the outside wouldn't make that much difference to travel time, but I do think the area in the middle could do with a tidy up. I've seen a few too many ships take some very silly routes just because that was all that was available. Yes, I seem to be arguing against spaghetti. Maybe I'm ill. Thanks to our efforts over the last few weeks, we've cut down on the pollution on this planet drastically. It happened very suddenly. I initially expected it to gradually pull back in much as it spread out, but because it's gradually absorbed by water and slightly more quickly by land, it was all getting gradually shallower, more or less evenly across the cloud, thinning out until suddenly it all vanished just like that. We're now in about as good a position as possible. There's a small amount of EM radiation being released from the oil rigs, and some of the islands have roboport networks, but that's fantastic compared to how things were when we had a massive load of electrical machines on Home Island. We've gone green. Or, since the pollution cloud on this planet is green, we've gone not green. We should be able to maintain this level from now on, and so I don't think the copper spitters are going to bother us much, at least unless Mike's copper processing system ends up releasing a bunch. But even if it does, that island is completely electricity free, so maybe they won't be angry. That said, he's thought of that and put in some turrets to make sure that they will be angry. I guess we'll see how that goes. At this point, I think we're very close to finished on this planet. There's a few things left to be tidied up and finished off, but isn't that always the case? This probably means that by the time you see this video, we'll be off on another planet, finding new mistakes to make. Come along on Monday at 7:30 PM UK time for the stream to see how things are going. If you fancy making all these mistakes yourself, you can grab the Planetary Pioneers mod from the Factorio mod portal. Let us know on the Discord server how you get on with it. I'll also be back for a solo stream on Wednesday. Maybe it'll be Factorio, maybe it'll be something else. There's only one way to find out. And finally, there'll be videos much like this one coming out every Thursday and Friday as well, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out. Thanks for watching, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.